Hello and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude Sandoval and I'm your host. And oh boy, we got a topic that I love today. It is all about teens, and considering I have two teens and a preteen, I am extraordinarily excited to talk to my guest today. But first, again, show note, the divorce quiz is still up at the website, an awesome tool to help you gauge where you're at in your divorce compared to others who have gone through it. It takes about 10 minutes. We'll give you immediate results and the opportunity for us to go through and review those results. Check it out at the website under the divorce quiz tab, or you can go to it directly at thedivorcequiz.com. It's an awesome tool, so please check it out. Okay, my guest today is an author, coach, and founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. He's been married for 40 years and has 6 children as well as 12 grandchildren. His background as a family enrichment coach and life experience provide a unique perspective on parenthood. His book, How to Be the Parent Your Teenager Needs You to Be, is his second book on parenting. Please welcome Jim White. Jim, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it as well.
Oh, me too. And I've got 2 teens, I've got a preteen, and like I was saying just before we were talking, this podcast, basically, I know we got all the guys listening, but it's all about me. This is a self-serving podcast to pick your brain and pick up some pearls of wisdom about how to parent teens. Before we get into that, though, just share with us, why in the world did you get involved with working with teens or learning how to work with teens if you don't, in fact, have to?
Yep. So it's a little bit of the backstory, how I got here. So,
Yes.
And actually, it's kind of a 40-year journey. I think you mentioned that I've been married for 40 years, and I've had an interest and have been a student of personal development, parenting, and marriage for those 40 years. But more importantly, I've been taking lessons learned and applying them in my life as a husband and a parent of 6 children over those 40 years as well. I like to think of myself, and this is a little bit of a theme I like to share with the other parents. I like to think of me as going through and having a classic example of a hero's 2 journeys. I don't know if you're familiar with that idea or not,
Yes.
but it's a storytelling. It's a lot of times in movies and books, they'll use that story arc, if you will. And for your folks that aren't familiar with it, the hero's 2 journeys, the premise is that the main character or the hero has some task or goal that they're trying to accomplish. And this is like an outside journey. It's the journey of accomplishment.
Right.
And well, that makes for an interesting story, and it's the second journey that makes the hero or the story compelling. And that is, there's this internal journey that the hero is going through as well. They're going through a transformation internally. They're discovering new principles, values, beliefs, or discovering stuff about themselves that just make their lives work better, puts them in a better place. And that's that second journey of transformation. And how this relates to me is, as you can imagine, a father of 6 children, there was a lot of stuff to take care of and to accomplish. You know, there was homework to take care of, there's meals to cook, places to be, clothes to buy. I mean, there was just a lot to deal with. And as with any journey of accomplishment, we had a lot of obstacles that we had to overcome as well. Everything from, you know, a lost homework assignment to one of our children struggled a little bit with a learning disability. Everything from scratched knees and bruises to, we had some issues with drugs and alcohol with one of our kids. Teaching them to ride a bike and all that goes with that, all the way to car accidents. I don't know, maybe you've dealt with a car accident at this point. I'm not sure if you've gotten there or not.
My oldest gets her license next week, so
okay,
talk to
so
me.
that,
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be a new one that you may have to deal with. So, and as you can imagine, we've had other, you know, financial issues. The first part of my working career was with a business that my father had started, and that business went through a bankruptcy. And as you can imagine, over 40 years of marriage, we've had both cloudy and sunny days as well. We've had our times, and it's just part of what everybody goes through. And I'm sure your audience has their own stories as well. But the interesting part is that as I was going along that outside journey, doing all the stuff that a father of 6 children does, I was also experiencing this internal transformation. And it really was through my interest and passion for, again, personal development, marriage, and parenting. And along the way, I was discovering the principles, values, beliefs that just made our family work better, and made things, just flow better. And we had experienced more peace and joy and happiness, if you will. And in fact, it's hard to believe. It's been like 20 years ago. I wrote a definition of a successful family, which is one of the things I encourage people to do. It's like almost create like a vision statement for your family. What is the ideal? And, for me, it was about, a successful family is one that speaks with respect. They honor differences, they empower each other, they enjoy being together. Another important component is that they have the ability to effectively deal with any difficult issues that come their way, because we all have these things that happen, right? And then finally, there's a sense of peace, joy, warmth, and love within the home. And so that was, again, 20 years ago, I put that together. And while our family, we don't always represent that ideal, we do more often than not. And then the other piece of it is when something happens that kind of throws us off our game, if you will, I now have a really good idea of how to bring us back. And that's part of that internal transformation over all those years. And where I am now, my kids are kind of grown and gone. I mentioned I have grandchildren. My youngest is actually in college now. And with that, I just feel a calling to share the insights and the lessons and the wisdom that I've gained over 40 years as a parent. And so I founded the Family Enrichment Academy as a vehicle to help me share what I've learned over those 40 years. And the book, you mentioned I wrote a book. That's the first piece of this. Obviously, I do coaching with folks, individual coaching and programs as well. But that's sort of the 40-year journey and a 5-minute description of how I've come to where I am now.
Which is phenomenal. And I love how you equate it to the hero's journey, because I feel as fathers that is being the hero of your own family is a huge, huge thing. And we don't get told that often. And
right.
we don't get told that, and we don't get supported in that kind of idea in philosophy. And so the way that you just equated that, I really, really like it. We can be the heroes of our own, not only our own journey, but our own family,
right.
in our kids. And that's super, super cool. I
right.
like that.
And part of the role is to take a stand for the family, or take a stand for your child in a way that is empowering to them, to allow them to grow and develop, which I don't know if you can tell, my hat H2J, that stands for the hero's 2 journeys. And that's part of my message with everybody. And with that, I really like to encourage parents to think about, it's not just about parenting your child, it's about your own transformation as well. That second journey is so important, because there's an opportunity, and we all have an opportunity to grow and develop and become better people. And as you become a better person, a lot of what our kids pick up from us, and teenagers are really good at this, is they just watch, and you model what it is to be a quality person, if you will. And if you have a growth mindset, for example, if a parent is a parent that's open to growing and learning and developing, you teach that to your child at that point. And when I say teens, they're real good at catching you when you're inauthentic. You say one thing and you do something else, they're going to catch you and call you on it. So they're always watching. And so that whole process of going through your own journey is so important as well. And there's a ton of value there.
Well, and during this time of divorce, and for a lot of those, for the men listening that are in the midst of it, that's a beautiful message of hope that you're describing, and in equating it to that hero's journey, in that your children are watching you. And we talk about this often, particularly in group meetings, when we're talking about our struggles of what each of us are going on, and we're supporting each other, and we're encouraging each other to keep being strong and keep fighting the battle that you might need to battle. Not that this is like, not that you're battling or going to war with your soon-to-be ex, but there are some times where you do need to stand up for yourself or your children or a principle or something in this process. And oftentimes lots of the guys get beat down on this or get discouraged on this. And so I love that message of the hero's journey, because there's so much on the other side of it that can be beneficial. And you described just a few of them, but
Right.
it really is an opportunity. And I know I know some guys go, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
This sucks. This is hell. But hey, when you think of the hero's journey in the movies, they go through some sort of external and internal hell before they get to
Absolutely.
the light. So I really love that. I really love that. And then the other thing that you talked about, there was just so, geez, Jim, there was so much to unpack, and just your introduction is amazing. I love it. When you talked about developing those principles, values, and beliefs around what you want your family to be, creating a vision for your family, or putting together your intentions for what you want to happen. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that's one of the things in private coaching that we talk about, because this is, whether you like it or not, during divorce, your life is going to change. This is
Right.
all going to be changed, different. And so again, it's an opportunity to refine this and then create what you want.
So yeah, and it's the way I like to share it with people, and sort of the way I describe it. It starts with this idea that we have two competing thought systems, or two competing mindsets that reside within all of us. This is the way I like to share it with people. And one of those is fear-based, and one of those is love-based.
Yep.
And in every moment, as you go through life will, I like to say, puts the squeeze on you. And when it does that, you're going to respond either out of a fear-based mindset, or a fear-based thought system, if you will, or a love-based one. And part of the journey is to start to be able to be intentional about how you're responding and where you're coming from as you respond. The first piece within the book that I talk about, it's all about, how do I manage my mindset? And the dads that your audience is built around, they're in a real squeeze, if you will. Things are coming at them, and things are happening that really can cause them to fall into that fearful mindset, if you will. And when I say fearful, it's that anytime you're experiencing some frustration or disappointment or anger, those are signs that you're more of a fearful mindset. And the issue is that it's hard to, you won't really be able to heal or move forward when that's where you're coming from. And so while you're there, and it's, it happens. I mean, everybody goes through it, and you have those moments where you're in that place. In order to really start the healing process, and you talk about hope and be able to move forward, you got to find a way to start to shift into more of a love-based mindset, because it just presents some different, it gives you different strategies or actions that you can take, and those are going to be healing and help to move things forward. So that's the first thing I would say is this distinction. And with teenagers, I'll extend that to, with parents, there's the premise of wanting to control what's going on versus empower. And that distinction, those line right up with the fear versus the love base. So when you're fearful, you tend to want to control or over control what the teen's doing, versus trying to empower them to be their absolute best. And those kind of line up. And those, a lot of times, people really resonate with those, the idea of control versus empowerment.
Right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that, and also this challenge that comes up when we're going through this transition of divorce, and how we can help our teens better get through it, because they experience things, and communicating and dealing with them is a little bit different than the younger kids. My children were very young when I went through the divorce, but I know a lot of the dads listening now have teens. And I know when my parents got divorced, I was 15. And so that was shocking. It was confusing, and there were so many things. And my parents were a train wreck. So basically we didn't even talk about it. It was like, your dad's gone, and so he's not coming back. What do you want for dinner? It's like, so help us a little bit, and help those that are listening a little bit with some ideas for how we can do that and communicate with the teens about what's happening.
Right. And so in a intact family, one of the biggest issues teens deal with is they start to feel disconnected. And in fact, the parents start to feel disconnected from the teen. So that is just a natural process that happens as a child grows into the teen years, because you think about teenager starts to see themselves as separate, and they start to see themselves as their own individual. They start to develop their own opinions and ideas about things. And that's just part of that process, but it's a scary place for them to be, because up until that point, they always were very connected to the family and to themselves. Now transfer that into a situation where there's a divorce, that just gets magnified 10 times. That teen is going to feel very disconnected and like they don't belong. It's just in some situation, whose house am I? I mean, all that stuff that they go through, think of it in terms of them just feeling isolated and disconnected and alone and by themselves. And that's just an awful place for someone to be, especially a teenager.
And let me ask for some clarification on that. You say that they feel disconnected, and not in the sense that they're wanting to disconnect because they're trying to become more autonomous, but they begin to have this feeling of disconnection as they become more autonomous. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and even a teen in a intact, healthy family, it's like competing mindsets for them. They want to be autonomous, but they love being connected too. It's scary to be alone. And it's the same for all of us. I mean, we all want to feel connected and like we have relationships and connection with people, but at the same time, we want to be our own person. And for a teenager, they're learning to balance that. And they really deep down inside just crave the connection with their parents, father or mother. They want that connection and they need it, even when they act like they don't. It's there. And there's a deep need to feel connected, and because it feels safe and you feel like, okay, somebody's got my back, if you will, and to have that sense that I'm unconditionally loved. It goes back to that loving mindset. There's a lot of peace and just a sense of connection when you feel like somebody unconditionally loves you. And that's what a parent does with a child. But if they start to feel that break down, again, it's a scary place for the child to feel like they're out on their own. And that's when they go look for it in other places. I mean, you see that happen all the time. The teen feels disconnected from home. Well, they're going to go find it at school with a certain peer group, or, they got to find it somewhere because they do crave that. And again, the point with the divorce is that it magnifies that, because it's confusing to them, and they feel even more disconnected. The whole point is, I think one of the biggest things your audience can do is be very intentional about building connection or healing that connection and finding ways to do that, because that's going to go a long way to helping that teen get through this circumstance that they're in. And
and I want to make a point about that too, because I run into situations where it's a high conflict divorce, and there might be one of the parents that is attempting to alienate the child. The child's old enough to consciously be aware of the dynamic and what's going on, but not understand what alienation is. Could be an early teenager or a preteen. And it's very difficult and frustrating, particularly for the men that get disconnected from or don't have as much parenting time, or for whatever reason don't have any or very little contact with them. And what I'm hearing you say is, at all costs, do whatever you can to stay in connection and relation with them, because that's the best possible thing you can do.
Yeah, it's, and they want it. And so you just got to be very intentional about that. And I think in going back, the first piece of that is for the dad in this case, and it's hard, I understand it's hard, but to try to stay as grounded as they can in a love-based perspective or a love-based mindset. And when you feel like you're being thrown under the bus and that everybody, all the bad stuff that can happen, the conflict that's there, it's very difficult to stay in that place. Because, and the reason I say that is because when you're not, and the teen, you do have some time with the teen, you're losing that time, because again, when you're in that bad mindset, it damages the relationship. The teen picks up on it. And even if you don't say anything, it's just your presence. You know how it is. If you're around somebody who's frustrated, they don't say anything, it. You just pick up on it. And again, the teen feeling isolated, they can't connect with you when you're in that place. And so you got to be able to shift that and try to get into a good place, so then you can connect, because that's the prerequisite. You can't build connection if you're in a fearful place, not a quality connection anyway.
Right. That's a great point, is try, and like, this is very easily said, but try to get yourself in a place where you can be present and you can create the atmosphere in how you want to relate in that positive manner during the time that you have with them, whether that's on a phone or a brief call or whatever, or if you have extended parenting time. Try to get yourself to a place where you can do that in a beneficial, positive manner. So
here's an idea, a technique, if you will, that your dads might be able to use. I talk about transitions and being intentional around transitions. An example of a transition would be, your teenage son or daughter you're going to pick them up at school, and this is your, time with them. So that's a transition. And so the technique is 10 minutes before you go into that transition to create a pause, gather yourself a little bit, and have some kind of an idea of how do you want that first 15 minutes to go? How do I want to be in this first 15 minutes? I want to be compassionate. I want to be present. I want to be open, whatever it is, but you try to be very intentional about your mindset before you enter that transition with the child. I talk about with other families, when the child comes home from school, they show up every day at 3:45, they walk in the door off the bus or whatever, at 3 o'clock, stop for a minute and be very intentional about sort of gathering yourself and shifting your mindset to get yourself in a good place so that you can have a positive interaction, especially that first 15 minutes or so. So that's an example of an intentional technique, that you can use to try to make those transitions work better.
Yeah, that's great. And what about then, you mentioned something a little bit earlier in the intro also about some processes and symbolism, which I really love, which I feel is another great opportunity during this, in creating something that's regular, something that they can count on when they're going through this process, like this transition. Is there some advice around on that, creating routines or something like that to help them?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is a great way to build connection is through a shared experience. And what I mean by that is, something that you do together. Maybe if it's a dad and a the daughter likes to cook, why not take a cooking class together? And so it's over an 8-week period. You've got that structure. It's there, boom, you're doing it together. It's a chance to build connection. And again, it's not about having deep, dark conversations. It's just about being together and doing something together. If it's a son that likes basketball, maybe it's a regular thing to go to a high school basketball game together. You try to make some effort to create some structure around a shared experience. And that creates a little bit of a tradition. The other, we hear talk about families and having traditions, whatever that might be. I'm here in Indianapolis, I mentioned to you, and I know a lot of families, the Indianapolis 500, they've done that every year for 50 years, and it's just part of the fabric of the family. And that's a shared experience that creates a bond and connection. And the reason, part of why that's so important is kind of the next step that I always talk about, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the idea of empowerment. Sometimes people like to use the word influence. Well, you can't empower or influence the team if you don't first have a strong connection.
Yeah.
And so that's how these things build on each other. First, it's about the parent being in a good place. That makes possible building that connection. Now that I built the connection, now I can empower and influence them and have some impact on their life. So it's, they sort of build on each other, and you can't influence or empower if you don't have a connection, which when you think about it, kind of makes sense that that's the case.
Right. And in building that connection doesn't necessarily have to be a big cooking class. It can be something as simple as, so I try to give my daughter a hug every single morning when we get up. Good morning. How did you sleep? And I give them a hug. And that's my start of my day in connecting with them before they all go crazy in the bathroom, getting ready and everything else. Right. Okay. So, so it doesn't have to be a grand scheme. It doesn't have to be this big tradition. It can be something as simple, and tell me if I'm wrong or right about this, but it also then creates a safe space, a structured environment, in the sense that they know that that's always going to be there. Right. Dad's hug's going to be there every morning, or whatever it is you create. Like one that I've heard and we've done too is movie and pizza night on Fridays. They just know, and it's going to be something that is simple, but they know, and that's comfortable for them. And that creates that connection you talked about. Right.
Absolutely. And it does. It makes them feel safe. I think that's a great word, because they feel connected. And the opposite would be they feel isolated and alone. And when you feel isolated and alone, you don't feel safe. So and it can be stuff that's very simple.
And they're going to still complain about the movie. Absolutely. And they're not going to like it, and they're going to argue with you about it, and the pizza's going to suck, and and everything, and then I want to stay up later till like whatever time in it. But the point is you're still creating that connection right there. And actually, and I'd love to hear your take on this. I was told this once, and it kind of reframed and shifted my mindset about the teens arguing with me. Is that the thing was, if they feel safe and comfortable with you, they're going to argue with you, because it's a safe place to test those boundaries and that autonomy that we were talking about earlier. I would agree with that. There's another piece to that too. I like to say that sometimes bad behavior is really just a call that they need to deepen that connection, because sometimes they think about it this way: if they're going through something and they have a lot of pent up emotional energy, negative energy, it's just got to get out. And that may come out by them picking a fight with one of their siblings. It may come out by them being apathetic about their homework. I mean, it can come out in a lot of different ways, but the bottom line is they feel like they need to connect. They're not feeling that safe environment. And I think where you're talking about the argument, it's a debate, maybe more of that. They will debate with you, and they love to do that. Everything's a freaking debate, Jim. Everything, nonstop. It's unbelievable. Like, I don't want to debate from the time we wake up until the time we go to bed. Right? Please.
Yeah, but that's part of them sort of finding boundaries and what have you, and it's a chance. And again, from an empowerment standpoint, the goal, you have to honor what they're saying. You want to hear them. They want to feel like they're being heard, but that doesn't mean that they always are going to get their way or get what they want, because they don't have to win every debate, but they at least have to be able to participate without it being a hard, I'm not going to talk about this, so that's the other thing. And then, sometimes a teen will come and they'll be ready to talk, and the parent won't recognize that they're wanting to talk, and they miss that opportunity. So and you mentioned being present, and that's another, actually that's one of, I have like 9 strategies for building connection, and being present is one of them. It's the idea of being aware of when the teen's ready to talk, and then when they are, getting rid of the distractions, whether it's your phone or your computer, whatever, and really trying to focus in and be with them and just be present while they talk. So it's a huge gift if you can do that.
Right. And you're gonna have something for all the listeners at the end when we talk that's gonna help kind of what you were just talking about. So hopefully everybody keeps listening to the end, because you'll have something that I will be signing and trying to get also, because I'm guilty of what you described some of the time, because well, and I'm way down the road on the divorce, and I should have all this stuff figured out. I'd say I should have this stuff figured out, but we don't. But even when you're in it in chaotic, it's challenging to get to do that, to be present, to look for the signs. You have to have focused energy, focused in on what you're doing and paying attention to it, and then having, if you don't have the skills or the strategy for what to do when that happens, and having that conversation, then you got to build those too and create the space and the environment for it.
Right.
It's
And,
an effort.
and there's two things I would follow up there. That goes back to what we talked about, being intentional. I mean, you have to make an effort and say to yourself, okay, I'm going to be intentional about trying to grow and develop as a parent. And the other thing I would say, and we've talked about this journey, the Heroes 2 journey, I would just add to that, parenting is a journey. And every family, every circumstance is unique and different. And there's always, and think about this from your parenting standpoint, you start with a new baby, everything that happens is brand new to you, and you're learning and growing now that you got, well, when they turn 5, it's all new stuff again, right? And when they turn 10, it's all new stuff again. And when they turn 50, it never ends. So don't feel like you're never going to get there completely. And there's always going to be times where you look back and say, well, maybe I didn't handle that, or it could have been better. But that's perfect. That's it. What happened was exactly what's supposed to happen. And you just continue to grow and learn and develop. And again, try to maintain that love-based mindset as much as possible. And you can always heal. That's the other thing I would say, is you can always heal something from the past. When you come from that love-based mindset, it's never too late to heal a relationship, or to heal and reconnect and deepen it. And sometimes you go through a breakdown in the connection, and you kind of mentioned it before, you have a little issue with a teen, connection breaks down, but when you go back and heal, you're in a stronger place than you were before, because you've gone through that difficulty and now you've rehealed it and demonstrated a willingness and a capacity to heal. And so not only have you healed that relationship, you've sort of demonstrated that and set the example for your teen on how to heal relationships, because it's going to happen to them later in their life.
What a powerful way to help them learn something in life that they probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to learn, or you wouldn't have been able to create a circumstance for them to learn, and then be even ahead of the game when they get into relationships and going forward, seeing that's that's awesome.
Which I would just, what popped in my head is, divorce is probably it is the most difficult thing from a relationship standpoint for a family to go through. And so as you go through it, as the dad going through that, if, as you mentioned, if you can be the hero and kind of continue to take a stand for how do we heal these relationships, how do we move forward and make it work for everybody? I mean, not only does it make things work better for you and for the family and for your children, but it teaches that skill set. And for your child, then when they get married, if they have that skill set, they may not have to go through that difficulty then, because they will have the skills to build connections and maintain relationships, and their family then may work better as a result of that. So it's really, there's an opportunity here if you take it and look at it that way,
which is very, very hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
To think about when you're going through it, and you might have shame, and then you're dealing with the grieving of the loss of the relationship, or the ideal of what you wanted with the family. But I just want to reiterate what you said, which is there's no perfect way. There's no perfect way in a perfect marriage with a perfect family, because there is no perfect, because it just doesn't happen. So have some grace with yourself going through this process.
Absolutely.
And utilize the opportunity, like you said, to go back. And so this was another one that was hard for me to learn, but I've actually feel like I've gotten good at it, is apologizing, going back and saying, hey, I did not handle that very well. I apologize. I hope you can forgive me. What can I do to make it up for you? And again, that's probably Jim, has been for me one of the number one things in building connection with my teen daughters is, especially when they just, because they know how to push that button, right? They know exactly, they know me, they've known me their whole lives, so more than most people in my life, so they know how to push the buttons. So, and if I'm off balance, they do it. So, but going back and saying, hey, I apologize, really helps.
Yeah, I would agree. And something I'll throw out, one of, again, I have these 9 strategies for building connection.
Yeah.
And one of them
Well,
is
don't give them all away.
I won't give them all away. That's all right. I want to help people. But one of them is being vulnerable. Being vulnerable is a great way to connect with people. And in the situation with a teen, like a teen daughter or, teenager, and what you're going through, to go to them and say, you know what, this is new to me. I've never been in this situation, having a 16-year-old daughter, being in through a divorce, whatever. I know I've made some mistakes in the past, but I'm committed to trying to do better going forward. I just wanted you to know that, like I say, you apologize. I'm sorry if I did something that didn't work, but you're being vulnerable. You're sort of opening up that, hey, and I'm committed to trying to grow. I think that's the other piece of it, is you say that to the teen. I'm going to try to grow and do the best I can as a parent. I may not be perfect all the time, but that's my goal. And so, that kind of a conversation can build a lot of connection as well.
I feel like that would be a wonderful conversation to have with a teen that you're talking to at the start of the divorce process. That just it kind of sets the tone,
right,
for all of it, because you have no idea.
Right.
Every divorce is different. Everything, it's so chaotic. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, and that's, as men, that's disconcerting as it is, because we're orderly and we want to process, and we want to know exactly where we're going, and we have no freaking idea. It's just, it's off. So that's an awesome opportunity to say, I'm scared. I don't know. Right. We want to know, because we're guys, we want to know what the answer is, but I don't know. And I'm going to make mistakes, but
yeah. Can I add to that? This might be a great opportunity at that moment to create a little bit of a vision statement. Here we are, where we are. This is kind of where I'd like for us to be. And it's things like, how do we want to treat each other? What do we want, our family to represent, or our relationship? So you create a little bit of a vision statement, and then you acknowledge there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And we always want to work towards that. And then 6 months later, when there's a conflict or something happens, it's like, we're not doing what we said we thought we were going to do. We're not living up to, this ideal. And then it's a question of, how do we get there? And again, part of this empowerment process is engage with the teen in that question. Have them contribute ideas. What do we need to do differently in order to get there? Because they may have some great ideas, and their perspective needs to be part of that process as well. So you collaborate, if you will, and empower them to engage in helping to build towards whatever that ideal might be.
Right, which is, it's great to get their opinion. Although you might, it might not be that's because I get this all the time. Well, you're not listening. Yes, I am listening. I just am not subscribing to what it is that you want.
Right.
So I appreciate what you're saying, but that's not going to change the course of action or what we're going to do or what the decision is.
Right.
But I do respect what you have to say, and I do appreciate that, and I've taken it into consideration. But and so let's talk about that a little bit, because that kind of goes into this pushing and the control issues that go on with teens. And you kind of, I remember in the beginning, so my 60s, this is a few years ago, in the beginning with my 16-year-old, just falling into the pattern of being like me, being a teenage boy too, and just back and forth and just trying to shut her down and be a teen too. And I woke up to it one day and said, whoa, you're the adult here. You need to stop and figure out a better way. But that control, like that constant control battle. Give me some ideas around that. I've gotten better. I'm sure I'm not anywhere near as good as I can be, though.
Right. Well, the first piece is what you just talked. You have to have some awareness, and just introducing the idea that there's this distinction between being in control or fear-based and being love-based or empowerment-based. And just having that awareness so that you can try to catch yourself when you're doing it. Another one that dads tend to really try to do is we want to fix problems. And
Oh
so the
yeah.
teen comes to you with, and they just want to, kind of download their day and tell you what happened. And we immediately want to jump in and say, well, this is what you ought to do. You need to, and they don't want, it's not what they're after. They're not asking that. They just want you to listen and to be there. So that first step is just around awareness. And then, having an intention and a commitment to try to shift to empowerment. And another, you talked about where sometimes they want to do something, but you don't feel like they're ready for it. And actually, again, in the book, I talk about there's this perceived readiness gap. And that gap is the teen will always overestimate their ability to handle a particular circumstance. They think they can handle it. But then on the other side, the parent 9 times out of 10 underestimates what the teen can really handle. And so you've got this gap in the middle. And part of our role, and one of the reasons why building connection is so important is because the stronger my connection, I have more insight into that teen's readiness, if you will. And let's take driving, for example. If I have a really strong connection, I have a pretty good feel whether they can be responsible driving. I have some insight as to how they process and make decisions and how responsible they are. If we're not connected, I don't have any idea. So the natural response is fear-based, control it, you don't get to do anything. Because at least I know then you're not going to go out and get in a crash. But some of that's because you really just don't have the insight or the information to know how ready they are. And actually another story I heard, this is one that's popped up where the teen is looking for you to be a little bit of guardrails for them. And it's a driving example where the teen asked to go somewhere and the parent had a good feel for him, said, no, I don't think really that's a good idea. It was like an away football game kind of a thing. So it was be driving further away. And of course the teen fought, but later on admitted that they really didn't feel like they were ready and they didn't feel comfortable making that trip, but they still asked anyway, kind of a thing. And so they were appreciative of the fact that the parent in this case sort of put that guardrail on, but yet they fought it in the moment, so that those things happen. But that's where the connection is so critical because it helps give you insight into how prepared and ready they are and where the gaps are. So you can, again, empower them and help them to develop. And so like, let's say, again, an example like that, where it's driving someplace far away. Well, I'm not comfortable with that today, but I know that eventually we got to get you there, the teen, to be able to do that. So again, ask them, what can we do over the next 2 months to get me comfortable and to get you comfortable being able to go to an away football game. And so you develop a plan. And that makes the fact that I can't go tonight, but I know there's a plan to where I can go 2 months from now. That makes, that a lot easier to stomach or to swallow, if you will, that I can't go tonight. Because I know at least you heard me. I know that you recognize it's important and we've got a strategy to try to get there. And build that out together. So that's an example of connection and empowerment and how that works, can work together.
That's awesome. And as you say that, I'm thinking about it like a half dozen conversations where that would have been so helpful. Just that tip there. So where could we, how could we get you to where I would feel comfortable with that? Because I use the thing, I'm just not comfortable with that. But the second part of what you just said was, well, let's talk about how I can get comfortable and do that. And I love it. And so that is why the audience members need to get in contact with you, Jim, because those are gems. I'm telling you, gems that can help just help mitigate some of the difficulties and challenges around that, particularly if you're trying to communicate during divorce. So tell the audience how they can, tell them about the book, where they can find the book, and then tell us how we can connect with you, and then about your freebie. So those three things.
Okay, perfect. So the book is available on Amazon. So you can go there. If you go to, and the website is familyenrichmentacademy.com. In the book, I've got a link to Amazon there. So you can go there and link to Amazon, or just go to Amazon and search my name and the title of the book, which is How to Be the Parent Your Teenager Needs You to Be. And it should pop up. So check that out. And then the freebie, and we've talked a little bit about, one of the biggest issues that parents run into is this feeling of disconnected, or like their teen won't talk to them. You know, the old dreaded one-word answer. You say, you know, how was school today? And they just say fine, and that's all you get. And so the idea is, okay, how do I get my teen to open up and talk a little bit more? And what I would throw out is, you need to ask better questions. That's the key, is better questions. And so what I have is, the resource is, there are 10 questions to never ask your teen, under the premise they're conversation killers. You know, these are the things that just shut them down, right?
I'm scared to death to get that list. I'm gonna.
And then, but then on the flip side, I've got 10 great questions, you know, conversation starters. So it gives you some insight into the quality, you know, how to ask questions, and the quality of the questions can have a big impact. And again, the fear-based mindset tends to ask the questions that shut them down, you know, the ones that you shouldn't ask. It's where you're trying to control what's going on, if you will. So anyway, it's a free resource. You know, they can go to the website and get it, or, you know, we'll have a link for you that they can go right to and download that.
Great. And then if anybody wants to connect with you directly, is there a way to do that?
Like say, familyenrichmentacademy.com is the website. There's a contact page there if you can't write it down right now, with my email address, but my email is just jim@familyenrichmentacademy.com. Feel free to reach out. So would love to help. And it's, you know, for me, I say this is a calling. I just love being able to share this information, and to be able to serve people. And there's, you know, I will say that one of my little mottos as well, and I'd like for people to keep in mind, is that a change in perspective changes everything. And as you're going through this process, your audience going through a divorce, or maybe they're already, you know, through it and trying to deal with the aftermath, you know, if you can find a way to shift that perspective a little bit, I'm telling you, it can just really transform what's happening, and create a lot of hope and possibility. You can see into a future that's good for everybody.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I'll just add that if you found value in our conversation today, please like the podcast. Please share the podcast. If you're watching it, give us a like. If you're listening on a podcast platform, give us a star rating or leave us a comment. It helps immensely. And let's spread this word to more divorced dads that are out there. The community continues to grow, and it's because you're sharing, but also because I'm able to track more phenomenal guests like Jim White today, and he's willing to share all his pearls of wisdom. So, Jim, I really appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure. It's been a joy.
Take care.